Hi, I'm Tom Ollerton, and this is the Shiny New Object podcast. This podcast is my mission to better understand marketing technology, and I have the privilege of every week interviewing people who I know, who are successful in the world of marketing, advertising, and who are genuinely nice people and interesting. On Tuesday, I interviewed. We'll see. I interviewed a friend of mine, Justin Cook, who's the vice chair of UNICEF. It was a brilliant episode, and I started it the beginning of that episode saying, "This is the big one. This is the big one. This is
until the next one.
until someone from phones for you next week."
There you go.
So I'm clearly very excited about having Jeremy Waite on my podcast, and we've known each other for quite a while now, like quite a few years, and met in sort of different guises. I was trying to think
back, 2010 maybe.
I think so, but you've been a friend and a cool person to hang out with. But genuinely, and I say this from the heart, you've been a real inspiration, particularly recently doing your podcast, the 10 Words podcast. But I also read the 10 Words book. Like, I read every page of it. I read every page of it, which is
you
rare. You
spotted the typos?
Rare.
There was a couple.
Yeah, I got a bit. Just right, okay. So he hasn't proofread this. Is fine. So you've got a hell of a story, and I've done so many interesting things. I'm going to try and get the best out of you in an hour. But can you start by telling everyone what you do now and how you got to do that job?
That is a very good question. I have a little bit of a wanky job title.
Go on.
I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for IBM Watson Customer Engagement for Europe. So it's a very big grown-up job for an incredibly large company for a big AI that we'll maybe get into later on. I wanted to go into the stock exchange. You remember in the 80s in Wall Street, the Oliver Stone movie with Gordon Gekko and Charlie?
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, greed is good. Okay. I had some red braces. That's what I wanted to do. There's a moment in Wall Street where Bud Fox, the Charlie Sheen character, gets up in the middle of the night, he's with a really hot girl, she's naked, walks across the screen, and he gets up, pulls a quilt back and goes on his computer. And he's checking the indexes and stuff. I built on my VIC-20 a little program database to look exactly like Bud Fox's screen. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a trader. So I was going to City University and then realised, actually, that's going to kill me. And I had no interest in that at all. I went away and travelled for a little bit.
Where'd you go?
Travelled across Europe, went to US, just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I always thought I was going to go into finance, accounting, stockbroking, and I was looking at some type of, banking type role. Wanted to be Gekko. It was totally bought into. I'm not even kidding. 14 years old, every single day I went to the corner shop, bought an FT, right? Paid all my spends, all my pocket money on a copy of the FT.
Yeah.
Not a fucking clue what it said. My mum and dad are like, why are you buying this thing? I'm like hoping, like by osmosis, something's going to soak in and I'm going to figure out how this world works. Anyway, for years, that's what I did. Like 14, 15, 16, bought the FT every day.
So you went travelling, and what was your kind of...
So here's the thing. So I studied maths, further maths and theology. Love numbers and love people. And not so much the religious side, but like the tribes and the cults and how people behave and how they move.
And you did that at uni, or...
So I did that at uni, and then I went to my dad's company because he was just bitching all the time.
Which was?
My dad's company was Swift in Manchester.
Right, okay.
So my dad owned, it was print management, offset litho, right at the beginning of digital printing. When you started to have personalised print on the old Indigos that were bought by HP years ago. Yeah. And he used to come home all the time. And I'd say it to him now if he was sat here. It was just like, he was so pissed. And I'm like, man, you're self-employed. Like, there's nothing about your job that you shouldn't like. You're going to get to all of this. You should be the happiest guy in the world. And he was like, the employee didn't do this, didn't like that, they didn't pay, this was... And all the time I was like, here's how you fix your problems. And like, what the fuck do I know? I'm like, 22 years old or something. And in the end, he's like, right, you come and do it. So maybe we'll get into this in the questions later on, but it was... Okay, so I went to work as creative director. I took a big title. I thought, this is wicked.
Well, 22.
I'm now a creative director, right, of a branding consultancy doing print. Did that for 10 years. Was going to take over my dad's business. Obviously, the print industry changed. .com had happened. And then it got to the moment where a couple of really close friends, including some family members, said, you're going to fail. You shouldn't take over the family business because we think you're probably going to bankrupt it. So that hits you like a ton of bricks, right? So I'm like, well, shit, what am I going to do now? Because I've been working for 10 years on a salary of 24 grand with virtually no pay rise, thinking I'm going to take over the family jewels, right?
Yeah.
And didn't happen. And pretty contentious relationship for a little bit. So you know what happens when your back's against the wall? You're like, fuck it, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Set up my own agency. I'm like, right, so went through all these different names, started off being called Jericho. It was named Juicy eventually, which was this relationship management company, Juicy. Sexy as hell brochures, 120-page brochure, big kind of 210 mil square, matte laminated, spot UV, foils. That was gorgeous. Got an investor who was one of the early investors in the whole Dragon's Den thing. Made some money pretty quick, grew 3 offices and a bunch of people quite fast, then 2008. And he's like, Jez, phones me up one night. I'm going to have to leave, make myself a bit scarce. Turns out, may have invested in something, didn't do due diligence in. So you're not going to see me for a little bit. But anyway, good luck with the business. I'm like, I'm the creative guy. I'm not the operations guy. I'm going to keep the company running. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Anyway, so it's like, again, backs against the wall. How I'm going to try and figure out how this works. Tried to do it for 18 months. And it went bankrupt. And then all of a sudden, everything comes back. Because you're like, everything that everybody said about, this is why you're going to fail, this is why you're not good enough, this is why you couldn't do it. And that thing, you talk about what drives you. Yeah. In that moment, you're just like...
How old are you at this point?
Now what am I going to do? So that was 2008, so I'm, 30? I'm born in 72.
Right.
So, yeah, so 30. So it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, okay.
So off the back of that, the fortunate thing is that I knew a bunch of famous people. And a couple of them...
And what's the link there?
Because it was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now.
No, how do you know the famous people? So
from the worlds that I was working in and the branding and design and stuff that I was doing.
And like who?
So I'm not going to drop names like that. But there was one guy who I will drop. He was running a conservation park in the Lake District, Dalton-in-Furness. No, this is awesome, man. Okay. So he's running an animal sanctuary for conservation, to raise awareness in Dalton-in-Furness in the Lake District.
Yeah.
David, he's got 2 baby giraffes. He's like, Jez, why don't you just come and work for me for a little bit? So that's where the giraffe keeper story came from. So I went to work, true story, as a giraffe keeper while I'm trying to figure out what it is I want to do with my life, just to get away from digital and print and design and marketing and all that, because I've not got a clue. So anyway, just to wrap all of that up, basically what happened is I went from that. One of these friends that I had said, look, I've got a farm in Wales, just take my farm, do a day a week consulting for my company, which was packaging design, Selfridges and Harvey Nicks and a bunch of other sexy companies. And the rest of the time, he's like, just do something, build something that you want to do next. Yeah. And I thought, I want to write books, but no one's going to buy them because they don't know who I am.
Just pause on that. Why did you want to write books? Because you've talked about this kind of very sort of capitalist, Gordon Gekko type vision, and all this stuff happened. But what was driving you to write a book? Tell me about that. What was going on?
I loved the idea that the thing that I always knew that I was reasonably good at was storytelling. And not so much my story, but other people's stories. And I loved that. And back then, this was right in the early days of social, right? You remember Gary Vaynerchuk? We all fell in love with him before he became a dick. And he was talking about loads of cool stuff. And he was talking about how the future belongs to the DJs. And I thought, this is one of the greatest things I've ever heard. He's like, everyone's sat around under the trees and in their own little startup bubbles trying to figure out what's the original content that we should be, what's the thing I'm going to invent that no one else has done. And Gary Vee didn't say that. He's like, the people that are going to win are the ones that just remix the content that's already out, you respin it, and you kick it back out to your audience, which is probably a more niche audience, but in a language that they understand, like Brian Cox does on TV really well. But all of a sudden, these guys are getting exposed to stuff that they would have never have seen anywhere else. So I fell in love with this idea of how could you curate really good stories. And in the middle of that, I'm thinking of Tiger Woods had his issues with his porn stars, Lady Gaga's blowing up, she's killing it at Glastonbury and stuff. And I thought, how could I tell their stories to marketers in a way that also is interested and sexy, but helps them to be better at their job. So don't talk to me about crisis comms, because I'm just going to die. I'm going to want to kill myself. But if you talk to me about how Tiger should have handled his crisis, or what Liam Gallagher would have done, now all of a sudden you're interested. And I tried it in a couple of workshops, and I thought that shit would be good in a book.
Yeah.
And I decided to self-publish. I had this idea that I might speak at some point, but you don't get a speaking gig because you've not got a book. No one's going to buy the book because... Anyway, so what's a beautiful kind of come full circle? I recorded an episode on Jerry Seinfeld last week on my podcast, and there was this gorgeous moment where Jerry talked about right at the beginning of his career. He's like, I didn't give a shit about being a super famous, billion-dollar comedian. I just wanted to be one of those guys. I just wanted to stand up, do a gig, even if I bomb, I'm now one of those guys because I did a set.
Yeah.
And, stand-up Citizens Comedy Club or something. And he's like, now I'm one of them. That's all I wanted to do. So I didn't care if nobody wrote my book because now I'm an author.
Right.
Now I'm feeling good about myself. And the thing is, beautiful, off the back of that, started to do a bit more consultancy work. Then all of a sudden I've got this language that I'm using. Phones for You comes along. We need to recruit people for social media, but we don't have a clue what that looks like. No one's recruited it before. You're one of the first heads of social in Europe. There's no job description. It doesn't exist. We've got a feeling that it's something to do with people and numbers, and it's got to be for a professional that could put it... It's okay in the boardroom, but he can go out and put that stuff in a language that the guy in the street can understand. Oh, and by the way, all of our audience is 13 to 17-year-old girls that buy pink Blackberries. You up for that? So once we got past the yes I can, I'd love to, this would be ace.
Yeah.
Every interview it was, what's the top 10 at the moment? Who's number 1? Who's number 3? I'm like, I don't know. Just honestly, it was ridiculous. And anyway, then that just started a chain of events, and you probably know the rest from there.
I know the rest, but the audience who's never come across you... I won't give two,
because we'll get into one of them in a question later on, but I left Phones for You under very, very sketchy circumstances in a lawsuit.
Can you talk about that?
I can talk about that now because Phones for You, we'll get into that in a sec. Went to TBG.
TBG, yeah, of course.
Running the Facebook ads, doing all of that thing.
Yeah,
and they're now Sprinkler. Adobe says we're setting up a marketing cloud in Europe. Do you want to come and head it up? So I was the first head of social strategy.
Yeah.
Helped to launch Adobe Marketing Cloud. Salesforce is like, we're going to do the same. Exact Target had just come in. Do you want to help launch the Salesforce Marketing Cloud? Love to. And I love Benioff. Absolutely adored the vision of Salesforce. And then happy to talk about it if you want, but through a process of events, ended up having twins who weren't supposed to survive. And I found out completely by accident that IBM Watson technology was helping to save their lives. At completely the same time, talk about everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm being recruited by IBM, and they have no idea.
Can you talk about your recruitment story? I tell everyone your recruitment story, but are you allowed to talk about that, or should we?
From an IBM point of view,
yeah.
But the fact I turned it down 4 times,
and then said, "Could I meet a certain person?" Can you tell that story?
So here's the thing, right? This is my suspicious mind working, and there's no truth in what I'm about to say, but I'm just naturally very, very suspicious. The thing is, I'm at Salesforce, I get exposure to some really cool stuff. You've got emerging technologies, you've got roadmap of products and all that kind of thing. Every time someone approached me for a job, and the thing is, when you've got a certain level in the corporate world, you get jobs, as I'm sure you do, all the time, people are pinging you for stuff. And my knee-jerk reaction to every single one was, thank you, flattered, no, but, I can recommend other people. All the time. This thing from IBM kept coming back.
Yeah.
And it was a slightly different deal, with slightly different language, but it was like, no, we really want you.
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, but I'd want this. And what if I could have Fridays off? And what if I could do this? And I don't want to... And each time that we'll go in and think about it, it kept coming back bigger and bigger. I'm like, this is now getting to the stage that this is too good to be true.
Right.
It's my dream job with a ton of freedom to travel around the world telling stories about the best technology in the world, doing stuff that no one else is doing. Like, what's not to love about that? So I turned it. What I actually thought was happening was that I thought they may be an outpost of a recruiter somewhere who may be representing Salesforce, trying to figure out if I'm loyal.
Yeah.
Now I have no evidence that practices take place, but I'm thinking if I was leading a company like that and I was trying to figure out who is loyal, providing that they thought I was valuable, is that the kind of thing you might do? I don't know. So anyway, I said no, until that moment in the hospital when I'm looking at the scans of my little girls, neither of which are supposed to survive.
What percent chance do they have of surviving?
Well, you call them twin 1 and twin 2 because you're not allowed to give them names when they die. So you're not allowed to. You're not allowed. You're encouraged to not name them so you don't get attached. Twin 1 was the small twin, 0% chance of survival. She's going to die. We just don't know when. Twin 2 was 40% chance of survival. And what actually ended, we found that out properly at 31 weeks. About 11 weeks before, 20 weeks, we even had surgery to split, getting all graphic, we split the placenta. Basically, because what happens is, we have identical twins and they're sharing and they kind of have all the nutrients to live to 36, 38 weeks for twins. With ours, the small twin was literally hanging off the end, bless her. For dear life, she's not got enough to sustain her throughout the rest. So they're like, the doctors are like, percentage-wise, it's going to die. It's not going to make it. But you've got a 40% chance of the big twin. Now, the issue, if you don't essentially terminate one by cutting the placenta in half and you're limiting, she's never going to have any more nutrients. That's it. She's done for the next, 36, 16 weeks or something. Because what they don't want to happen is that you're forced to give birth for one, or one of them dies and you're forced to give birth to the other. So if you split the placenta, you're still protecting the life of the big one.
Yeah.
Now, as I'm looking at those odds, and every single week goes past when it still looks like they're still all right, man. Blood flow to the brain, umbilical cord, fluids, bladder, bowels, everything's still looking good.
Yeah.
I'm sat there and I'm talking to the data scientist and I'm like, how do you make sure that the next family that comes across doesn't get odds?
You're talking to a data scientist in a hospital?
Yeah, because it was because the thing that we had that was wrong, we were in King's Fetal Medical Research Centre. We were used as a test case because there's hardly any cases in the world that had the same condition.
Right.
So we're having the test cases, we're having scans every week, we're having MRIs. This never happens for any pregnancy, let alone some of the high-risk stuff. So we're kind of a research project at the same time as trying to deal with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm chatting to the data scientist, looking at this MRI scan, and I'm trying to detach myself emotionally, right? I'm like, all this data that you've got, and I can see the wires and the computer and the analytics are going everywhere. I've got my marketing hat on. And she's like, yeah, there's about 10,000 data points a second coming off that we're trying to measure. We're trying to figure out next best actions and stuff. And So I'm looking at this just like you would in NICU when you see all the wires and the cannulas and the TPN heart rate monitors coming off for premature babies. And that's when they said, we're working on a project with IBM to figure out within a I get goosebumps thinking about it now.
Yeah, wow.
Within a 24-hour window, how to predict what's going to go wrong, how to solve it, even the lamps that you would use, the ultraviolet, TPN type of drugs. So basically, how do we figure out we make the right decisions? So I go back to the IBM guys and I'm like, look, if any of what you've told me is true, I want to speak to the CEO. And I want to hear firsthand that that this is real, that this AI you're talking about can actually do these things, and B, just to make sure that the offer is genuine. Anyway, turns out that it is. I sit down with the CEO of Watson. We spend an hour talking about everything apart from marketing. Didn't mention marketing once. Told me all the stories of some of the stuff we're doing in AI. Fell in love with the company straight away. Accepted the job immediately without even knowing what I was going to do. And the rest, as they say, is history. I couldn't be happier.
So, it's a great career, and people may be forgiven for thinking you're a bit smug sometimes. So I'm curious to go a bit deeper.
Go on, smug
and
because I've been so fortunate, you mean, in landing on my feet each time?
Yeah.
Every time I fucked up, I landed somewhere
exactly.
good.
So what I want to do is get into what are those failures that really set you up for success? And you've talked about Juicy and how that goes wrong, but I don't want to hear about it from a kind of story level, but psychologically, how did you pick yourself up? What were the tools and techniques that you used to turn yourself to turn yourself around? Because it may well have been a book, or I know on the podcast you talk about the impact that the American TV show Ellen had on a certain period in your life. So I'm just
and J.K. Rowling chatted about the Dementors and
So tell me, how did you turn yourself around internally to?
Do you know the thing is,
this success?
When something like that happens, now, because the other side of the story is not just that I lost my business at that time. The full story is that There was some sketchy stuff going on with my wife and one of my friends that ended in divorce very quickly. My business partners disappeared. I drive down to London to try and salvage some business, have a head-on car crash on the way back. Should have died in a car crash. I'm in a Mini, right? You know, like you can roll a car sideways. That's normally how cars roll. I was in a Mini that rolled long ways and landed on its roof at 85 miles an hour on the M6 at 20 past 1 in the morning, skimming across a truck. And when that's happening and your life literally flashes before your eyes, stupid things go through your head, man. I was going across, first of all, took my hands off the wheel because there's nothing you can do because the car's just out of control. Yeah. Someone came down the wrong way and hit me head on middle of the night on the motorway. It was ridiculous. Just couldn't have seen it coming, didn't even brake. But you take your hands off the steering wheel and close your eyes because you don't want to watch yourself die. Like, I know I'm about to die, like, without doubt, but I don't want to watch it happen. So take my hands off, close my eyes. Feels like an eternity.
Yeah.
The car's bouncing. This is sandbag services on the M6. So all of that, by the way, I walked out with a grazed knee. Buy a Mini, everybody. Flipping awesome. The sunroof still worked. The car was battered.
The old Mini or the new one?
New Mini.
New Mini. Okay.
Smashed. I went out and brought a John Cooper Works one straight away because it was just the most awesome thing. Anyway, so to answer your question, it's not just that that's happened with a business. You've now got all these personal, professional, healthcare issues going on at exactly the same time. Yeah. All of that happened within about 6 weeks. When things get so extreme, you're going to react one of two ways. You're going to jump off a bridge or do something stupid, or you're just going to laugh. And what happened afterwards, because you don't go bankrupt instantly, it takes a very, very long death by 1,000 paper cuts. Yeah. And you're trying to salvage bits and you're trying to do a bit of consulting, you're still trying to, I'm taking a photograph of my last £10 note and saying to my mate, what should I do with it? Do I buy toast so that I can live for a couple of days, or do I put it into gas to go to a meeting in North Wales, knowing I probably can't get back if I don't win the deal, hoping that they'll also give me some cash to survive? That doesn't happen in agency life. You can't go to people and say, can you just wedge me do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't do that. So anyway, you literally, John Robb, a beautiful punk poet from Manchester, told me once, live on toast. Stop trying to feel like you're privileged and go for the big thing. Sometimes when you're setting your own thing, you just got to live on toast. So I had no ego whatsoever. I'm fine living on toast and just going around my mates. But then as more and more bad things started to happen and I saw the business was going to fold and I wasn't going to be this super entrepreneur, it was, you just laugh. You've got to laugh about it. And each time something else bad happened, it'd be like, well, of course that'd happen because that's just brilliant. Because why wouldn't it? Because if they survived that and this happened and that, so one thing leads to another and you're just like, yeah, this is brilliant. Come on, what's next?
So that was stuff that happened in a very
fight
short...
or flight, isn't it? You have a survival instinct that just kicks in.
Well, the things you've mentioned, I don't think most people go through that stuff in such a short amount of time. So that must be really reassuring to know that if all that kind of level stuff happens again, you're going to be all right. So presumably you've gone from a reactive mindset where shit would happen to you and you kind of build on it and you overcome. So I'm curious to what are the new kind of beliefs and behaviours in the last 5 years that have improved your work life?
I think the thing, there's two parts to that. First of all, the thing that's helped me stay sane is meditation.
Talk to me. I meditate every day in the morning.
So I was fascinated
what is your
by
process?
So you've got things like transcendental meditation. And I was fascinated with the Jerry Seinfeld thing because there's a lot of people like Jerry and a lot of these celebrities that are just kind of, sometimes it feels like they're rolling it out as a label. It's like they've got this thing like I do TM and it's supposed to be 20 minutes in the morning after you get up and 20 minutes at 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
You do that?
And it gives you, I do in the morning, but it's supposed to give you the energy. And a meditation like that, there's no philosophy, there's no religion, no belief system, nothing else, just pure meditation. Now the thing is, that's a really specific practice. So I wouldn't say that I do that. What I do is have a lot of time to chill with my head being clear in a load of space. Tony Robbins gave me a really practical version because he says take 10 minutes every morning. Everybody's got 10 minutes. If you've not, you're too busy. Nobody can not find 10 minutes from somewhere. But of that 10 minutes, you spend about 4 minutes just being grateful for stuff, just saying thanks. Why is that? Because it's impossible to harness any type of negative, fearful emotions while you're giving thanks. It's just you're humanly incapable of doing that. So you give thanks, you have a totally different vibe.
So how do you do that? Is that just
So
get specific? So do you like?
So I was brought up in the church. So this isn't like a faith thing, but I'm giving thanks to some master creator universe thing of just like, here's all the cool stuff that I'm really grateful for, and just trying to focus on here's the stuff that I'm super thankful for, and family and wife and job and health and stuff.
And do you have a list of it, or
no?
You just
it's just a process.
On that day, like...
And I have this. There's a thing in the front of my notebook I can show you in a second if you're interested.
Yeah.
But then you have 3 minutes that you then looking at, well, here's what I want to ask for. And it's a little bit like that ask as if, here's what I would love to happen. So you're kind of throwing it out to the universe. Here's 2 things I'd love to happen by the end of the day. And then you're just spending 3 minutes visualizing what that day might look like. So I've done that almost religiously for, 10 years. Bearing in mind, by the way, I was brought up in the church and went to the whole Billy Graham crusades, full-on evangelist.
Yeah.
The reason my mum loves I'm an evangelist, because there's obviously the church Christian connotations to that. And I've always loved that. I've always been a bit wary about the religious side of it, the Jesus Christianity side, but everything else I love. The community, the belief system.
So you're wary of the religious element of religion?
I'm just wary of the arrogance of anybody from any belief system standing up and saying to anybody else, if you don't do these things, you're not going to get into wherever this thing is.
So do you consider yourself as a practicing Christian?
I'd say I'm a Christian, yeah, but also I wouldn't have any sort of like a level of arrogance when you have, say, some fundamentalist. If you're not baptized, you don't do this, you don't do that, therefore you're not going to get to heaven. They'd look at the Bible and that would be like hardcore literal translation. This is what the Bible says, therefore. I'm looking at what happens to the guy in the middle of Peru, or someone in the middle of Africa that's never heard any gospel from anywhere, that's barking at the moon and hugging trees, and he's getting his thanks and his community and the love for the people. He's getting a totally different belief system from somewhere else. Who are we to say no, not that guy? Do you know what I mean? And sometimes you take some formal religions to their logical extreme, and it's like, yeah, unfortunately, that's not the guy that's going to get in, because that's just because he's not the Christian. Then what? You have things like Mormonism springing up from all over the place. It's like, well, that's okay because now we'll baptize him when he's dead, and then we'll give him a second chance in some afterlife. So I've never wanted to get into the theology of that. What I want to do is look at what's going on today when we can make some kind of a difference with the people around us. So it's that very much, it's almost like a more Eastern view, isn't it? You're like looking within yourself as much as you're looking to some other bigger, higher purpose. If it wasn't for that reflection every day, I would have been fucked long ago, because I can't keep up. Not only have I got a silly job and I'm trying to do some of the projects on the side and twins and health and stuff, it's like you've got to have something like that, otherwise your wheels fall off.
And I'm curious, where do you stand on, it's not a ridiculous question, but like sort of meditation tech, if you like, things like Headspace and Calm?
I like that. I love that.
Do you use it?
I've got Headspace on my phone. I love it. I just couldn't.
Do you pay for it?
I don't. But I looked at it. The only thing I couldn't, it just felt a little bit like, it was too formulaic for me. It's like, here's a guy saying all the right words with a beautiful tone of voice, and now breathe and focus on yourself and do this. It's like, that's just not for me.
My experience of it was, I enjoyed it, but if I want to break from the game, the industry, then to go and sit in the bathroom, turn my smartphone on and open an app and then plug in some bits of metal into my... It just felt like what... now my practice is all just like, I put a timer on and then whatever happens.
My meditation is as much going and riding my bike around Richmond Park now, and just trying... I'm not looking at a screen. I'm riding fast. I'm trying not to get killed by falling off, and I'm trying to avoid squirrels and deer. And that for me, that's a meditation.
Tough life, yeah.
Because you've got, it's just you and a bike and the fresh air, and you kind of, whether it's...
So, so as much as we've gone down a theological rabbit hole, I'm going to yank you back to some of the...
gross misconduct.
No, not at all. So, what is the thing that you have bought with your own money that is super useful that you use for work?
That's a great question. This pen.
Jeremy, for those of you listening, he's holding up a fairly ordinary-looking pen.
I have a Mark Newson designed Mont Blanc. Mark Newson designed the Apple Watch. I collect Mont Blancs. There was a guy called Ryan Warren from Salesforce who heads up consulting practice over there. And I saw him once and he's writing away and he was always the cool guy. I was never the cool guy and I always looked at him as like he was just super cool. And he had a really shitty notebook and like a legal pad, and he had a really badass pen. And he said, here's the secret to consulting. Here's the secret to being good at what you do. I'm like, oh, come on, here we go. Because he was like, no PowerPoint, no. He was like, you've got to have a badass pen and you just use a crap notebook just for the sense of irony. So as shallow and as douchey and as stupid as it feels, right? Yeah. I started going in. Now the thing is, I went one stage further because I bought a sexy notebook.
How much you pay for this?
They're like 500 quid each.
500 quid for a pen?
Yeah.
Fucking.
But I'll tell you why. Because straight away you take that pen out and you start writing.
Yeah.
And you have a change in mindset because all of a sudden the physical act of writing stuff. Now, bearing in mind, I'm tagging everything, screenshotting it, I'm doing image recognition, evernoting it. Everything is digital, completely digital. The pen and scribing and stuff. I've gone completely full circle to now I write everything longhand. I write with a real pen. I write all my scripts. I write the speeches. I write my decks. I write everything in this notebook, longhand. Everything.
It terrifies you, like because I've recently switched from digital back to.
And you know the other reason
I'm
why
I'm more scared of losing this than my laptop.
Yeah. No, me too.
Google Docs.
If I lose this, you can take my Mac. Yeah, but I don't want to lose my notebook.
Yeah, that is just this.
People say, well, what about the speed? Because you're not efficient anymore. Do you know what? The physical act in having to write a long, grown-up word with a cohesive sentence and grammar, it forces you to slow down to such a degree that you deliberately think about what you're writing. And all of a sudden, that thing that becomes this new thing that was over there at 1,000 miles an hour, that would have happened had I live streamed and done it in my normal digital life, now I'm thinking, actually, do you know what? That was a little bit shit. My point of view is actually completely different, and I wouldn't have given myself the space had I not have decided to write everything longhand anymore.
So that's interesting because I read a book, a life-changing book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Have you?
No.
It is a brutal book because that will take you to the core of yourself, right? And it's to help people kick off a creative project, basically. And I think it's like a 3-month course, and every chapter's a week or a month or something like that. And there's a bunch of different things that you go on, and I think probably the most famous thing that has come from it is a thing called the morning pages, where you sit down every morning and you give yourself a limit. So I use 10 minutes, or you could say 2 sides of A4, and you write anything. So you could go, I'm holding my pen, and I've just noticed like my trainer, and I've got an itch behind my eye, but you don't. No one's ever going to read it. You never read it.
Like a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, and it basically you just flush out all of that. Like,
have you seen the movie Finding Forrester with Sean Connery? Do you remember that?
No.
Basketball movie from years ago. Is it 90s? I think it was. And
no.
Sean Connery's the English teacher, Pulitzer Prize winner, he becomes this recluse. It's a little bit of a baseball movie, but there's a scene in that when he's trying to get this young black kid to write. He's like really prolific basketball player, but he's a brilliant writer. And that's the thing. He's like, start writing, and I'll start typing. Don't take the pen off the page. Write anything. Just keep going. Punch the pens. Punch the typewriter. Just keep. He's like, but I'm not thinking about. Don't think. Just. Yeah, and it's funny because after a couple of minutes. All of a sudden, this world starts unfolding in front of you, and your thoughts start to make sense. You don't get any of that with digital half the time.
I totally agree. But I think there's a balance for me, and I've even gone as far as I've seen. I think it's called Scannable.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Scan the notebooks as well.
And then we need like an AI that can read my handwriting. We don't. Anyway, let's not get into that. So one quick question before we go into your shiny new object. So you must have a real issue when it comes to saying no to things, because you're very much in demand. You do a podcast, you're a writer, you got a big job. How in the last 5 years have you become better at saying no to things in a work scenario?
There's a really nice quote that I love that Jobs used to say, and I'm always reluctant to throw out a Jobs quote because it seems like a cliche every time you hear it, but he said, I'm more proud of the things I didn't do than I am of what we did. And someone was challenging him about the success that he had, and they wanted him to talk about, you know, all the wonderful things in the industries and the things that they transformed. And he was like, no, my proudest achievement is the stuff that I said no to. The hardest thing that I found, and this is where I hope that people don't think I've got, you know, too much smugness, but certainly no ego. Because the thing is, you know, if I wanted an ego, I'd be going out doing some personal thing, and I have no interest in any of that at all. Saying no to speaking gigs, where people who have got really, really good intentions, they know that I did some crazy stuff at Facebook with Phones for You, got sacked for gross misconduct, and then all of that happened and blew up. So come and speak about this. Yeah. Come and speak about what happened at Adobe or Salesforce or the future of AI or something. So I look at that, of every single request that I can justify, and I want to say yes to everyone because I'm a nice guy, right? And I'm flattered that people have asked me to come and speak. The problem is I've not got enough hours in the day, and now what I'm starting to do is realise things like the podcast, things like my audience that is as much now the people that work inside IBM as it is the people outside. Like my audience is almost my colleagues and employees now. In order for me to be really, really good at that, I have to very respectfully say no to a ton of other stuff.
Do you have a criteria for saying no to things?
I have a very strict... Yeah, I have a criteria for saying no to stuff that's commercial. Usually now, it's like, look, I work for Watson. You know, I work for IBM. If we have an IBM event, and even with IBM, I get tons of requests. It's still like, okay, well, what type of request is it? Who's going to be in the room? Is it CMOs that are going to be in the room? Do they want to talk about AI? Are they interested in buying marketing technology? How are they going to influence? So I have 5 criteria, and some of them are commercial, as to when I say yes or no to stuff. This is obviously not one of those moments.
Well, it took me
because
a while.
We've known each other a little while. But the thing is, you've got to figure out, like, what is it that you're willing to say no to, where everybody can give you such a beautiful story about why you should do their thing. And it's like, I love you, thank you, but no.
I'd love to see your list. I have my own one.
And you know where that comes from? And there's a quote, and I got this from, like, right when I was really, really young, reading some business books. There's a Zig Ziglar quote, and it says, you can have everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, if there's one thing I want to do in my career, it's trying to help lots of other people get what they want. But that sometimes means, well, I want you to speak on my thing. Can you come to my conference? Can you support my startup? I could, but...
So that's why
I did the podcast.
That's really interesting you say that, because your motivation is to help other people get what they want. And I should have probably looked this up, but I was listening to the podcast about the French dude who's called
Cedric
Villani, and you got sort of quite carried away at the end of the podcast, and you were talking about like how your personal mission is to help other people achieve their goals. Can you just remind us what it is? You had it really succinct.
Yeah, and you've kind of got to be really careful with this as well, haven't you? Because it's like I didn't.
Just be honest, man.
No, but you don't want to be like, you're not trying to be the self-help motivational guy of here's how you achieve your goals and dreams. It's like I'm not in that space at all, and I'm not credible at doing that. What I've seen is lots of people throughout various stages of their life, and it took me until probably 40 to figure out mine. What's your mountain?
Yeah, that's it, your mountain.
So the thing is with the mountain, and some people get this when they're 10, 12, 16.
Yeah.
Some people get it at university. You're told at 16 when you see a careers officer, here's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to be Gordon Gekko. Do you know what I mean? That was my mountain. The thing is, it's only when a bunch of stuff happens that shapes you that you figure out somewhere along that journey, this was the thing I was put on this planet to do. Now, some people might figure that at 20, 30, 40. For me, it was very similar to the way that Simon Sinek talks, because I love what he does. And he talks about his purpose is, I just want to inspire other people to do what inspires them. So I look at my community, my world, and the IBM world of, I just want to inspire other people to do what inspires them. So my mountain is, how do I tell stories that inspire other people? Now, hopefully, that also inspires brands who make a ton of money, because then they might give more away because they have a higher purpose and they want to be attached to some of the stuff.
So beyond just say that again. How do I inspire people?
I want to inspire people, or I want to inspire others to do what inspires them. And I think the challenge is when you figure out what that mountain is. First of all, the challenge is realising that you've got one. You've got a mountain, right? Some people, it might even be overcoming addiction, loving a family, growing. It doesn't have to be anything commercial or creative. painting, learning languages and stuff. The thing is, we might get a couple of those opportunities in our life, and you kind of pass them by. It's like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'll come back to that later on. Or someone else will do that podcast. Someone else will write that book. Someone else will build that company. And it'll get to the point when if that's landed on your desk enough times, it might actually, you know what, maybe that's the thing that I should do. So now what?
Right, we'll come back to that, but I knew this would happen. I knew we'd get to the shiny new object pretty late. We've got 20 minutes left. So, sorry to be brutal.
No, this is good.
So, your shiny new object
yes,
is AI trainers.
AI trainers.
What is that?
Not the sneakers, AI trainers. Like the Pokemon trainers. You're trying to train the thing. So I work in AI, and obviously there's various different elements of AI, and we've tried there's a lot of generalisms.
Yeah.
And you have millions of different applications of AI across healthcare and education and commerce and marketing, supply chain. Like there's millions of different types of AI.
Yeah.
AI in itself is still an incredibly shiny thing.
Yeah.
Less than 3% of most industries have adopted even the thought of AI into their strategy. So even though we feel like we've talked about AI for a while, because we've read about it in Fast Company Wide and South by and CES and all of that,
yeah.
AI is still something super shiny that no one's figured out yet because they've not yet understood how to harness. I'm talking enterprises, not the small startups of the millions of people that we know, but most mainstream companies don't understand how to build AI into the fabric of their company. Maybe there's programmatic, there may be some type of chatbots that learn processing. So there's a layer of shininess to AI, right? And that's my job with Watson, talking about that type of AI. But the shiny that nobody's figured out is a problem yet is how do you train the AI? Because what happens? You're Nike. You need to go and build a new site with a new product that's only just been invented using some new technology to a new market. You've got to go and test that, and you've got to understand in real time, especially now with GDPR and privacy and everything, all the Cambridge stuff. People are super protective of their data. Nobody wants to share it anymore. So there's so much nervousness around managing a relationship of a person. Now, if you hand that off to an AI, the challenge, first of all, is that you've got to train the AI to get to a level of confidence that it's good at doing what it does, that it doesn't make silly mistakes. Now, in shoe retail, it may be you're 80% happy in the level of confidence to recommend a product. If that's driverless cars or oncology or education, or some type of healthcare treatment, you want 99.9%. Now, the challenge is it's really expensive historically to train an AI because it's man hours. It's people like me and you say, no, don't do this, do that. What about that level of sarcasm, this humour, that cultural reference, that joke? Yeah. You've got man hours training it. Then all of a sudden you've got an extra layer of what about political bias, racial agenda? Is there any type of sexual discrimination, either knowingly or unknowingly? How do you get a group of people to make sure that the AI has been trained in an ethical, moral, not just a scientific way, but that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing? Because AI ultimately is augmented intelligence. You're trying to augment human behavior. Now, so the shiny AI trainers, where nobody have thought that this is going to be a big enough issue yet because they still haven't put in the AI and figured out that it's not messed up enough times or it's not been trained well enough. What we'll find in a couple of years' time is everyone's looking at AI trainers, which is how do I now train this thing as fast as possible to be as accurate as possible? Now, you're going to hit one of two problems. Either you've not got enough people or you've not got enough money. Do you know what I mean? So you've not got enough people. Well, how do I then go? Is it possible to crowdsource to train AI for, say, that customer journey? Is it serving me the right ad with the right images? Or do I just give a massive sack of cash to a consulting house or whoever to train the AI? I could possibly do that. Success might actually look like something altogether completely different. It might be a body of 25,000 students that have signed up to a thing, and they've accepted that I'm going to test an AI journey for whatever. I'm interested in fashion. I'm interested in beauty products, right?
Yeah.
So I bought this lipstick. I'm thinking about this foundation. Which is the best one for me? And the AI might be recommending the different products. Now, what might happen is that as they're testing that journey themselves, they might do thumbs up, thumbs down. No, don't recommend that product. I'd rather go for this one. Don't use that word in Belgium. Use this one. In the Nordics, don't use that one. Use this one. And it's just wisdom of the masses in training this. Now, what you've seen in Silicon Valley is small startups testing this model, where students who have opted in to test these customer journeys might be getting paid 3 cents, 5, 10 cents per task. So did this do this right? Yes, click. And on the way to school, they might be yes, no, change this, do that, and they're training the AI. And they can be making $30, $40 a day. Bloomberg did a whole article on AI trainers. You just search Bloomberg Business Week, AI trainers, you'll see it come up. They're estimating that at the moment that industry is worth about 100 million. But within a few years, it's going to be worth several billion dollars. There's going to be companies that are going to be formed that are probably going to be bought by some very big companies for obscene amounts of money because they've harnessed the power of a group of people that can train an AI for a fraction of the cost much faster than a load of consultants on 500 an hour.
So what are the shortcomings of these AI training farms? Where does it fall down?
I don't know that we've even... Why do you think it's going to fall down?
Well, you know as well as I do.
These are not individuals making one-on-one discussions. These are... It's like a blockchain. This is tons of people verifying...
It's a little bit like a blockchain. It's more like if you've got a kid on a bus and they're saying, can you go through this Nike's user journey to buy a pair of whatever? Like, you know, what's that person...
But if you've got 25,000 people doing the same journey, you know that there's a level of accuracy, right? The guys at Uber have been...
But it's not devoid of bias, and it's not necessary. You can't guarantee that's clean data.
Of course, yeah, but when you've got enough people doing it, you're going to get as good a level of confidence as you're ever going to get from a human. You know, So it's like there's a great quote from Brad Voyek. He used to be the chief data scientist at Uber, and he used to say, "You used to need to know a lot of things about a lot of people in order to do stuff, marketing, whatever, selling things. Now you just need to know a couple of things anonymously, not even personalized, about a lot of people. So if I know 5 anonymous attributes of 1 million people, in many cases that's far more valuable than knowing 3,000 things about." Do you know what I mean? Just because the world has changed now, that's the power of AI, that I can take anonymous attributes of lookalike audiences, and if my sample size is big enough, my level of confidence shoots through the roof.
So
same arguments, driverless cars.
So if there's a marketing person listening to this podcast and they're thinking, well, Jeremy, that's very interesting. How do they practically use AI trainers?
Well, that's the issue. So they're going to do 2 things. They're either going to think, I'm doing a startup and I've got no money, so I need to figure out how to do it on my own. So they might want to think about going and building one, or looking at some type of, we talk about sharing economy. Why don't you go and build one? Go and build a thing of AI trainers in order to train whatever your favorite AI is. The other thing is, knowing that we're in such the early stages of AI and the commercial opportunities are so insane, there's not enough people that are utilising AI properly to make money. And when you're looking at the investment versus the level of money that's likely to come in, and I can think of a million different use cases, the cost of training the AI is fractional, it's tiny. And it's going to get disrupted even more. There was a great quote I heard the other day about, I think it came out of Davos, World Economic Forum, prediction that by 2030, the biggest company in the world will not be Apple or Alphabet. It will be an AI-powered education online company that no one's even heard of yet, like a Moog. Be an online course. It's like these things, no one's figured out yet what it looks like. And it's just getting that explosive. The problem that marketers have got now is they've got too much data to make sense of. And the amount of data in the world is doubling every 18 months. So they're all peeing their pants because they can't make sense of the data they've got, let alone go and get a load of new stuff. So the opportunities for them to make a ton of money or to make a ton of difference, whatever industry you're in, is to use an AI by starting small on whatever that big data set is that you've got. It's the thing that pisses me off more than anything about advertising, that people are running around chasing new clicks and eyeballs when they're sat on gold mines of really valuable data that they can't make sense of.
Give me an example.
80% of all the data that every company has got is unstructured. It's not in any format you can do anything with. 80% unstructured data. Voice, video data, emails, records, everything from the social web, PDFs, like all unstructured, 80%. Of that 80%, the average company analyses 0.5% of it, even though 33% of it is useful. Now, commercially, why would I do that more instead of put all my money into, say, some more ads? It's estimated, we can get a link in the show notes if you want to find it. I think it's from Forbes. Forbes magazine did it. For every 10% increase in access to your data, the average Fortune 500 company makes an extra $65 million. So the cost of an AI trainer pales into insignificance, because if you can unlock that much revenue and value from data that you're doing nothing with.
Right, okay, interesting. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But here's the rub with innovation and marketing. That having been an innovation person for a number of years, that you would think that marketing could get its fingers in all the pies and pull all this stuff together. But the reality is that there's very few marketers that, there's hardly any CEOs come from marketing. They tend to come through finance or operations, right? So
that wasn't going to be the case 5 years ago.
But it's all very well saying that. But how? Okay, so I'm the head of digital of a challenger bank, right? I can't get access to all of that data. How does a marketer take the steps to leverage that 30% of their useful data? How can they actually do that? It's fine at your theoretical level, but how do they actually?
This is like what we were chatting about over the whiskey before. This is where you've got the head and the heart, right? And this is about winning the hearts and minds. I see it all the time, and there's a stat we mentioned that I use in a lot of my presentations. 75% of executives make major strategic decisions about the future of their business with their gut, with their heart, even when the data says something different. The challenge for a marketer is that they've not usually got that much respect in the boardroom. In fact, research last year showed that 80% of CEOs no longer trust their CMOs at all. So the challenge you've got is the marketer, who's often the one looking at digital experiences, looking at customer data, trying to join the dots between sales, service and marketing, even when they don't share their own data. The CMO is usually the link to making all of that happen. The challenge is, how do you win over the hearts and minds in the boardrooms of the people that can either make that happen or pay for that to happen? And that's one of the biggest challenges that I see. Now, where Shiny comes in is that the CMO role itself almost isn't fit for purpose anymore. So what we're seeing now is this evolution of, well, maybe it's not about the marketers wants to be the next CMO to try and go off and do these wonderful things. Because what we're seeing is that more and more CMOs are losing their jobs never to be replaced. In 2018, 8% of CMOs in major companies will lose their jobs, never be replaced. There'll be no more CMOs. Why? They're going to be replaced with two separate functions. And they'll all have different names, but essentially it's going to be a chief growth officer and a chief innovation officer. One's in charge of revenue, share price. The commercials, one's in charge of vision, strategy, emerging tech, innovation going forward. It's like one's in charge of growth, one's in charge of change. Coca-Cola were the first to do it. Now you've got Hershey's, Walmart, Kellogg's, everyone else is following suit. So that chief growth officer and innovation officer should work together to represent the whole of that CMO's office to then go and win the hearts and minds in the boardrooms. That's the win. You win the hearts and minds of the people in the boardroom, not by going in with your data-driven discussions and arguments about here's the numbers of the ROI of whatever. It's like, I don't care. You tell me why this is important. It's going to protect this company in the next 5-10 years' time, knowing how much stuff's being disrupted.
So
that's another problem that most people don't realise they've got yet.
So once again, it's lovely. Do you see that happening in the UK? Like, is there a business in the UK?
We're a chunk behind the US. I think a lot of the enterprises you look at, It depends, and it depends by industry. I wouldn't want to throw out one number and then we get attacked because it's like, well, this is how far away we are. I used to have a belief that we were roughly about 18 months behind the West Coast, and that as you work across Europe, there's pockets in Scandinavia and Israel, but ultimately you work across Europe and it's like the lag gets further and further behind. The UK's doing pretty well, but we are still a chunk behind. What's fascinating, though, is that people like Chris Sacca and Peter Thiel and some of these investors that have been looking at the most innovative companies in tech are now like, that's a bubble in itself in Silicon Valley, and they're moving out to go somewhere else. I think in the UK, when you're looking at something like financial services, you could argue we're ahead of anyone else in the world. Would we do the same thing in retail? Probably not. Are we doing the same in quantum computing? Probably not. But, there's pockets in the UK where we're the best in the world.
So we're going to start to wrap this up.
Okay.
What's next for Jeremy Waite? So you've got this new job, Chief Strategy Officer. Congratulations, mate.
Thank you very much.
That's absolutely brilliant. But what kind of conversation are we going to be having in 5 years from now? Are you going to be,
we're going to be like, Jez, you know that thing about, you're going to be sat on your yacht somewhere having just built an AI training company and you sold it to IBM that we're now using to train Watson. I think, do you know what? I don't think my role now is any different than it was years ago. It's just that now I've got a slightly bigger audience and a good platform just to go off and tell better stories. My hope has always been, and I hope this for most marketers, that they underestimate the responsibility and the privilege that they have. They can walk into a boardroom, and if they do their job well, they're going to do one of two things. Paul Armstrong told me this when he was at Mindshare. He said, marketers only need to do two things. You make money or save money. So any marketers going in, having just made a shitload of money for their client or their brand, or they've saved them a bunch of money, which is often easy to show, operational cost savings. Marketers stop there because we won the award. Everything was amazing. We can all go to Cannes. We've all patted ourselves on the back and got a promotion. What about the guy that doesn't stop there? That's like, well, yeah, all done. And this was in the book, right? It was talking about 10 words. What about the people that you've made 10 million on that, and that's awesome. But if you made 8, you would have still been happy. We're all still rock stars. What if 2 million we put into a foundation to teach teenage girls to code? Or we put something into a healthcare project in West Africa? Marketers could go in, with all respect, into the boardroom and literally raise millions of dollars for beautiful causes that they feel passionate about if they've got the respect and credibility by influencing the hearts and minds of those senior execs. I don't think marketers realise that they're capable of doing that. Now, what they might do is feel good about themselves when they go and run the London Marathon and raise a couple of £1,000 for cancer research. But why not go and work for a big organisation or work with a farmer? And that pharma company that saved a ton of money has now put all of that money into some type of oncology research because of the recommendation you made. Like, that's what I want to be doing. And I think that's what all marketers should do more of.
That is a brilliant way to finish it. Right, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. So we started off with your early ambitions to be the Gordon Gekko of the Midlands. Then you got distracted by running you were creative director for your dad, and then you rebelled against that. You set up your own agency. Then that all went tits up. You were a giraffe keeper, and then you started to realise that you became good at telling other people's stories, and then you wanted to be a writer, so you became a writer. You had a car crash. You had your kids in intensive care, and you found solace in kind of gratefulness and meditation. But we kind of got distracted you onto weird things like the fact you collect posh pens. But really, where you got to at the end, and what I'm really kind of hooked onto your message is that you want to inspire others to do the things that have inspired them, and you've genuinely done that with me now and the other things that you do. And so I would love if the audience that don't already know about you would reach out and follow you or connect. How do you want them to do that? What would be the most
the thing that would bring me the most joy? By all means, throw abuse at me on Twitter at Jeremy Waite. My podcast is my labour of love. It has no agenda or commercial intent. You can go on, you can search it on iTunes, or you could just search 10 words at Jeremy Waite, and you'll find it coming up there. Jeremy.live is my blog where it all gets kicked out from. But really appreciate that, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, dude, fantastic. Let's do this again in a year's time.
Let's do it.